April 13, 1945, 10:47 p.m., outskirts of Zwolle, Netherlands. Temperature 11 degrees, moon phase, waning crescent, 23% illumination. Visibility 400 meters in darkness. Wind 8 kilometers per hour from the northwest, carrying the smell of smoke from burning villages. Corporal Leo Major crouched behind a hedgerow, 200 meters from the first German checkpoint. His left eye socket, empty since Normandy 11 months earlier, throbbed in the cold. The right eye compensated with vision so sharp his commanding officers called it unnatural. Through that single eye, Major watched two Wehrmacht soldiers smoking cigarettes beside a Kübelwagen, their Mauser rifles slung casually across their backs. The city of Zwolle stretched before him. 50,000 Dutch civilians living under Nazi occupation since May 1940. 5 years of fear, rationing, and repression. Canadian intelligence estimated 200 to 300 German troops remained in the city, preparing to defend against the advancing Allied forces. Major's orders were simple: conduct reconnaissance, report enemy positions, return by dawn. But Leo Major had never been good at following simple orders. Beside him, Private Willie Arsenault checked his Lee Enfield rifle for the third time in 10 minutes. The 24-year-old from Montreal whispered in French, their shared language, though Major's Quebecois accent carried the rough edges of New Brunswick logging camps, while Arsenault spoke with the precision of Catholic schools. 2 guards at the checkpoint, probably 4 more inside the gatehouse. Standard German defensive doctrine. Arsenault paused mid-sentence, noticing something in Major's expression. "Leo, we're just scouting, right? Just reconnaissance." Major adjusted the leather eye patch covering his left socket, a wound from the Scheldt campaign that had nearly ended his military career. The BR oaken glass from a German phosphorus grenade had shredded his eye beyond repair. Army doctors said he was finished. Major had punched one of them, stolen his discharge papers, and returned to his regiment. When officers discovered him back in combat, they tried to send him home. He refused. "I can shoot better with one eye than most men with 2, he'd said. His kill count proved it. 32 confirmed German soldiers in 6 months of combat since the injury. "Reconnaissance," Major finally answered, but his tone suggested something else entirely. His hand rested on the Sten gun strapped across his chest, 9-meter 32-round magazine, effective range 100 meters, British-made, Canadian-issued, German-feared. He carried 6 extra magazines in a canvas bag. Most soldiers carried 3. They moved forward at 11:03 p.m., using darkness and hedgerows as cover. Canadian military doctrine recommended 2-man patrols maintain 50 meters separation to minimize casualties from single engagement. Major and Arsenault stayed within arm's reach, an unspoken acknowledgement that if shooting started, they would need each other immediately. The checkpoint loomed closer. Wooden barricade, gatehouse with corrugated metal roof, 2 visible guards, presumably more inside. Standard Wehrmacht procedure placed 4-man teams at urban checkpoints, 2 outside, 2 inside, rotating every 2 hours. Current time, 11:14 p.m. Next rotation, 12 a.m. Window of opportunity, 46 minutes. Major signaled halt. Arsenault dropped prone beside him. Through the darkness, they could hear German voices, casual conversation about mail from home, complaints about rations, speculation about when the war would end. Normal soldiers doing a normal job. In different circumstances, Major might have sympathized. His own father had immigrated from France. His mother was Mi'kmaq, indigenous people who'd lived in Canada for 10,000 years before Europeans arrived. Major understood what it meant to be caught between empires. But these men wore swastikas. That eliminated sympathy. At 11:19 p.m. they circled east, bypassing the checkpoint. Military maps showed 3 entry points into Zwolle. Northern checkpoint bypassed. Eastern rail yard, objective. Southern bridge, German artillery position. The plan was to enter via the rail yard, observe enemy positions for 2 hours, and exfiltrate before dawn. Intelligence gathering, not engagement. They reached the rail yard at 11:34 p.m. Abandoned train cars lined rusted tracks, freight cars that once carried Dutch goods, now empty and forgotten. Major counted 6 German soldiers patrolling the perimeter. Arsenault noted positions on a hand-drawn map. Standard reconnaissance. Then the dog started barking. When plans die, the German shepherd lunged from between 2 freight cars, 80 pounds of muscle and teeth trained to detect intruders. Its handler, a Wehrmacht corporal, stumbled behind it, fumbling for his whistle. The dog didn't wait. It launched toward Arsenault, who raised his rifle instinctively. The shot cracked across the rail yard like breaking glass. The dog collapsed mid-leap. Its handler froze, staring at his dead animal. Then he blew his whistle, 3 sharp blasts that cut through the night like air raid sirens. German voices erupted across the rail yard. Soldiers emerged from guard posts, warehouses, and barracks. Flashlight beams swept across the darkness. Orders were shouted in German. Canadians in the rail yard. Alert all positions. Lock down the city. Major grabbed Arsenault's arm. Run, now. They sprinted west toward the city center. Behind them, rifle fire split the darkness. Wild shots from soldiers who couldn't see their targets but knew the direction of retreat. Bullets ricocheted off metal train cars, sparking in the darkness. The 2 Canadians vaulted over a low wall and dropped into an alley between brick warehouses. Arsenault pressed his back against the wall, gasping. "We're compromised. We need to exfiltrate. Standard protocol." More rifle fire. Closer now. German soldiers were converging on their last known position. Major checked his Sten gun. Full magazine. He had 192 rounds total. Arsenault had his rifle with 40 rounds, against an estimated 200-300 German soldiers. The mathematics were bad. "We can't go back," Major said quietly. "Every checkpoint will be on alert. They'll have patrols searching the perimeter. We'd be captured or killed before we covered 500 meters. Then what?" Arsenault's voice carried the edge of panic. He was young. This was his first deep penetration mission. Major looked toward the city center, where church spires rose against the night sky. Streetlights were dark, electricity rationed by German occupation authorities. Windows were shuttered. The city slept, unaware that 2 Canadian soldiers had just triggered a manhunt. "We go forward," Major said. "Forward. Leo, there are 300 Germans between us and then we make them think there are 300 Canadians." Arsenault stared at him. "That's insane." "Probably." Major chambered around in his Sten gun. "But retreating is suicide, and I didn't come this far to surrender to Nazis." At 11:47 p.m. they heard German voices 50 meters east, a patrol searching the alley system. Major signaled silence. The voices grew closer. Boots on cobblestone. Flashlight beams sweeping walls. The Germans were methodical, thorough, professional. They would find the 2 Canadians within minutes. Major made a decision that would be studied in military academies for decades. He stood up, stepped into the street, and opened fire. The psychology of terror. The Sten gun's 9mm rounds tore into the German patrol at 500 rounds per minute cyclic rate. Major fired in 3-round bursts, 3 seconds of fire, 2 seconds repositioning, a technique that made one weapon sound like multiple shooters. 4 German soldiers dropped in the first 5 seconds. The survivors scattered, shouting contradictory orders. Major sprinted north, reloading as he ran. Arsenault followed, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. They weren't retreating, they weren't hiding, they were attacking. 2 blocks north, Major kicked open the door of a closed bakery. The building was dark, abandoned since curfew began at 10 p.m. He positioned himself at the window, watching German soldiers converge on the street where the shooting had occurred. They moved cautiously, expecting ambush. "Why are we stopping?" Arsenault whispered. "Because if we keep running, they'll realize there's only two of us. But if we attack from multiple positions..." Major pulled a grenade from his belt. British Mills bomb, 4-second fuse, lethal radius 10 meters. "They'll think we're everywhere." He waited until the German patrol was directly below the bakery window. Then he pulled the pin and dropped the grenade. 4 seconds. The patrol commander looked up, saw the object falling. The explosion shattered windows across the street. The patrol scattered, 3 men down, others wounded and disoriented. Major fired another burst from the Sten gun, not aiming to kill but to create noise, confusion, fear. Then they moved again, east this time toward the city center. Behind them, German radio chatter filled the air. Major understood enough German to catch fragments. "Canadians in Sector 4. Multiple shooters. Request reinforcements." Multiple shooters. Perfect. At 12:14 a.m., they reached a German supply depot, warehouse converted to storage for ammunition, fuel, rations. 2 guards at the door, both nervous after hearing explosions across the city. Major shot them before they could raise their rifles. Arsenault stared at the bodies, his hands shaking. "Leo, we just killed soldiers, Nazi soldiers occupying a Dutch city." Major dragged the bodies inside the warehouse. "This is war, Willie, not murder." The warehouse was treasure. Crates of 7.92 mm ammunition for Mauser rifles. Drums of gasoline for Wehrmacht vehicles. Food supplies stolen from Dutch families. Major opened a gasoline drum and began splashing fuel across the floor. "What are you doing?" Arsenault asked. "Sending a message." Major lit a match and dropped it. The warehouse ignited instantly, gasoline fumes exploding in a fireball that lit the night sky like a miniature sun. Flames roared through the roof, visible across the entire city. Ammunition inside began cooking off, rifle rounds exploding in chain reactions that sounded like sustained machine gun fire. German response was immediate. Soldiers converged on the burning warehouse from 3 directions. Radio communications intensified. Officers shouted orders about fire brigades, security perimeters, search patterns. And Major kept moving. The night of 100 battles, 12:47 a.m. Major ambushed a German patrol near the central market square. 5 soldiers walking in standard formation, lead scout, main body, rear guard. Basic tactics, predictable movements. Major let the lead scout pass, then opened fire on the main body from 30 meters. 3 down before they could react. The scout turned and ran. Major let him go. "Why didn't you shoot him?" Arsenault demanded. "Because he'll tell his officers that Canadians are operating in the market square. They'll send more troops here, which means fewer troops where we're going next." 1:23 a.m. They reached a German communications post, building requisitioned from Dutch Postal Service, now housing radio equipment and telephone switchboards. Major didn't attack directly. Instead, he climbed to a rooftop across the street and began firing individual shots at the building's windows. Not enough to breach defenses, just enough to make occupants think they were under siege. German soldiers inside radioed for reinforcements. Major heard the response over their external speakers. "All available units respond to communications post under attack." Exactly what he wanted. 1:58 a.m. German reinforcements arrived. 12 soldiers in 2 Kubelwagen vehicles. They deployed in defensive positions around the communications post. Major waited until they were focused on the building. Then he and Arsenault attacked from behind. The Germans never saw them. 2 grenades, 30 rounds of Sten gunfire, 8 seconds of chaos. Major and Arsenault were gone before survivors could organize a response, but Private Willie Arsenault's luck ran out at 2:34 a.m. when brothers fall. They were moving through a residential street, Dutch houses with narrow facades and steep roofs, darkened windows where families slept through the chaos. A German patrol emerged from an alley 20 meters ahead. 4 soldiers, alert and ready after hearing combat reports all night. Both sides saw each other simultaneously. Both sides raised weapons, but the Germans fired first. The bullet hit Willie Arsenault in the chest, 7.1mm Mauser round, traveling at 760 meters per second, punching through sternum and lung before exiting below his right shoulder blade. He collapsed without a sound. Major killed all 4 Germans in 3 seconds. Then he dropped beside Arsenault, pressing hands against the chest wound, but he could feel the lung collapse beneath his fingers. Blood bubbled from Arsenault's mouth, lung shot, pneumothorax, death in minutes without immediate medical attention. Leo, Arsenault's voice was wet, drowning. "We need medic." "Hold on, Willie, I'll get you out." "No." Arsenault's hand grabbed Major's wrist. His grip was already weak. "Finish the mission. Liberate the city." Blood spilled from his lips. "Don't let them win." He died at 2:36 a.m., April 14, 1945. Willie Arsenault, age 24, from Montreal, Quebec. He'd survived D-Day, survived the Scheldt, survived 11 months of combat across France and the Netherlands. He died 2 streets away from freedom. Major closed Arsenault's eyes. Then he stood, his face empty of expression, his single eye reflecting firelight from the burning warehouse 3 blocks away. He had started this night with orders to scout and return. Now his partner was dead. The city was on alert. German forces were hunting him. Standard military doctrine said, "Withdraw, report casualties. Let larger forces handle liberation." Leo Major had never cared about standard military doctrine. He checked his ammunition. 4 magazines for the Sten gun, 128 rounds remaining. Arsenault's Lee Enfield rifle with 32 rounds, 6 grenades, 1 combat knife, and 1 Canadian corporal with 1 eye and nothing left to lose. At 2:41 a.m., Leo Major declared personal war on the German occupation of Zwolle. The city was about to learn why the Wehrmacht called him Der Einäugige Teufel, the one-eyed devil. April 14, 1945, 3:02 a.m., German Wehrmacht headquarters, Zwolle City Hall. Hauptmann Klaus Weber stood before a wall-mounted map of Zwolle, pushing red pins into locations where combat had been reported in the past 3 hours. 18 pins. 18 separate engagements across a city covering 43 square kilometers. His hand trembled as he placed the 19th pin, another ammunition depot destroyed. The mathematics made no sense. Weber had commanded defensive operations in Stalingrad, Kursk, and Normandy. He understood urban warfare. He understood Allied tactics. Canadian and British forces attacked in company-strength formations, 100-200 men supported by armor and artillery. They established perimeters, secured objectives, consolidated positions. They were methodical, predictable, professional. The force attacking Zwolle was none of those things. "Status report," Weber demanded. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer, consulted a growing stack of radio transcripts. 19 confirmed engagements since 23:47 hours. Casualties 27 dead, 18 wounded. Enemy casualties unknown. No prisoners captured, no bodies recovered. Pattern suggests. Bauer hesitated, reading through reports that contradicted everything he'd been taught at Officer Academy. "Pattern suggests what, Lieutenant?" "Sir, the attacks are simultaneous but geographically dispersed. Engagement duration averages 90 seconds. Short, violent, then complete withdrawal. No attempt to hold ground. No attempt to secure objectives. It's harassment tactics. Guerrilla warfare." Weber studied the map. The red pins formed no coherent pattern, no advance toward strategic targets, no effort to cut supply lines or seize transportation nodes, just chaos. Enemy strength estimate? Bauer consulted casualty reports, ammunition expenditure, engagement locations, standard Wehrmacht calculation, multiply observed firepower by 4, add 30% for support elements, round up for safety margin. Based on sustained automatic weapons fire at multiple locations, estimate 80-120 infantry, possibly a reinforced company with light weapons only, no armor, no artillery support. They're operating without coordination, different units attacking independently. Weber wanted to believe that assessment, but something felt wrong. 80-120 men could cause this much damage, yes, but infiltrating a city held by 200 German soldiers without detection, moving between engagement zones without being spotted by patrols, it violated every principle of military movement. Send runners to all checkpoint commanders, Weber ordered. I want visual confirmation of enemy numbers, not estimates, actual counts. And I want prisoners. We need to know what we're fighting. At 3:14 a.m., a runner arrived from the eastern sector. His report made Weber's blood run cold. Sir Oberfeldwebel Kruger reports engaging a Canadian soldier at the rail yard warehouse. Single target. Fired 40 rounds, no hit. Target escaped using smoke and darkness. Single soldier. Confirmed, sir. Kruger swears only one man. Weber dismissed the runner and turned to the map. Could one man create the illusion of an army? It seemed impossible, but if true, it meant every other report of multiple attackers might be wrong. It meant they weren't fighting 80-120 Canadians. They were fighting one. The ghost of Zwolle Leo Major, crouched in the bell tower of St. Michaelskirk, St. Michael's Church, watching German patrols search the streets below. He'd been moving continuously for 6 hours. His legs burned. His right eye ached from constant vigilance. The empty left socket throbbed where scar tissue pulled against the eye patch. He checked his ammunition. 2 magazines for the Sten gun, 64 rounds remaining. Arsenault's rifle with 18 rounds, 3 grenades, 1 combat knife. Not enough for a sustained fight, but enough to keep the Germans guessing. The church clock showed 3:27 a.m. He'd been attacking for 6 hours and 17 minutes. By his count, he'd killed or wounded 45 German soldiers. He'd destroyed 2 supply depots, 1 ammunition warehouse, and 12 vehicles. The city was in chaos. Patrols stumbling over each other, officers screaming contradictory orders, soldiers shooting at shadows. But it wasn't enough. To liberate a city, he needed to break German will to fight. Make them believe resistance was hopeless. Make them evacuate. He needed to become their worst nightmare. Major descended from the bell tower and moved southwest, toward the German command post. Every military operation had a headquarters, the brain controlling the body. Cut off the brain, the body dies. German headquarters was obviously the city hall. Largest building in the center square, radio antennas on the roof, sentries at every entrance. Standard assault doctrine said attacking a fortified headquarters required 10.1 numerical superiority. Major had 1.1 inferiority. He was outnumbered by every single German in the building. Perfect. At 3:52 a.m., he positioned himself in a bakery window across from City Hall. Range, 80 meters. German sentries visible at the main entrance. 4 soldiers, 2 on each side, rifles ready. Behind them, the entrance hall would be defended by at least another 6 soldiers. Upper floors would house command staff, communications equipment, and probably the garrison commander. Major couldn't assault the building, but he could make them think he could. He fired a single shot through the bakery window, a rifle round from Arsenault's Lee Enfield that cracked across the square and shattered a second-floor window of City Hall. The glass explosion was visible and audible, a statement of intent. German sentries reacted instantly, dropping into defensive positions. Officers inside would be scrambling to their battle stations. Radio operators would be sending alerts. The entire headquarters would be shifting into siege mode, which meant fewer patrols on the streets. Major waited 3 minutes, then fired another shot, this time at the radio antenna on the roof. The bullet sparked off metal, doing no real damage but creating noise and fear. Germans inside would assume they were under sustained sniper attack. He fired 6 more shots over the next 10 minutes, carefully aimed rounds that hit windows, doors, walls, but killed no one. Each shot reinforced the illusion. Canadian forces have surrounded headquarters. They're preparing an assault. At 4:03 a.m., German soldiers began evacuating surrounding buildings, pulling back into defensive positions around City Hall. Exactly what Major wanted. Concentrated defenders were easier to avoid than dispersed patrols. He left the bakery and moved northeast, giving City Hall a wide berth. By 4:17 a.m., he'd reached the northern checkpoint, the same position he'd bypassed 12 hours earlier with Arsenault. The checkpoint was now undermanned. Only 2 guards instead of the standard 6. The rest had been pulled into the city to hunt for Canadian commandos. Major approached from the west, using building shadows as cover. The guards were nervous, jumping at every sound, pointing their rifles at nothing. One was smoking, his hands shaking as he brought the cigarette to his lips. At 15 meters, Major stepped into the open and shouted in German, "Drop your weapons, you're surrounded!" Both guards spun toward his voice. They saw one man, eye patch, Sten gun, covered in dust and dried blood. For a moment they froze, trying to calculate odds. Major fired a 3-round burst over their heads. The bullets cracked past their ears, close enough to feel the air displacement. "Next burst goes through your chest. Drop the rifles, now!" They dropped them. Major approached with the Sten gun trained on their center mass. "How many soldiers remain in the city?" The older guard, maybe 35, veteran's eyes, answered in broken English. "Maybe 80, maybe less. Many wounded. You are Canadian." "I am." Major gestured toward the road leading out of Zwolle. "Take your wounded and leave. Tell your commander the Canadians have taken the city. Resistance is over." "But you are—" The guard looked around, searching for the rest of Major's unit. "Where is your army?" Major's single eye stared at him without expression. "I am the army." The guard's face went pale. "You are der einäugige Teufel. We heard reports." "Then you know what happens if you stay." Major stepped aside, creating a clear path to the exit. "Leave, now." They ran. Major watched them disappear into the darkness, carrying the story of a one-eyed demon who commanded an invisible army. The turning point, 4:47 a.m., German headquarters, City Hall. Hauptmann Weber received his 5th report in 30 minutes of soldiers deserting their posts. The pattern was always the same. Isolated sentries encountering Canadian forces, being told the city was lost, fleeing rather than fighting. But Weber's intelligence network, what remained of it, reported something different. Patrol after patrol described the same figure. One soldier, wearing an eye patch, speaking German, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Some patrols claimed he'd killed 5 men single-handedly. Others swore he was everywhere simultaneously. Weber didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in psychological warfare. At 5:02 a.m., he made the decision that would define his military career and end it in disgrace. "Order general evacuation," he told Lieutenant Bauer. "All units withdraw to defensive positions east of the city. We cannot hold against sustained Canadian assault with current force strength." "Sir, we have no confirmation of Canadian battalion presence. All verified sightings report one soldier. One soldier does not destroy 18 defensive positions In 6 hours. Weber's voice echoed through the headquarters. His exhaustion, his fear, his confusion, all of it erupted in that one shout. Either we are fighting one impossibly skilled commando, or we are fighting a much larger force using deception tactics. Either way, holding this city costs more lives than it's worth. Germany has already lost this war. I will not sacrifice my men for a city that means nothing. The evacuation began at 5:14 a.m. German soldiers emerged from defensive positions across Zwolle, groups of 3, 4, 6 men moving quickly toward the eastern exit roads. They carried their wounded. They left their dead. They abandoned equipment, ammunition, vehicles, everything that would slow their retreat. Leo Major watched them go from his position in the church bell tower. He counted soldiers as they passed 58, 59, 60. By 5:47 a.m., the count reached 93. More than he'd estimated, far more than he'd killed. He'd won. But the war wasn't over yet. The last German 6:18 a.m. Major descended from the bell tower and moved through the city streets. The silence was eerie after 6 hours of constant combat. Abandoned German helmets littered cobblestones. Smoldering fires burned where supply depots had exploded. Bloodstains marked locations where men had died. But most of Zwolle was intact. No artillery bombardment, no airstrikes, no mass destruction that typically accompanied urban liberation. The Dutch civilians sleeping in their homes had no idea their city had been freed by a single Canadian corporal. Major reached the central square at 6:34 a.m. The city hall stood empty, its doors hanging open. He entered cautiously, Sten gun ready, scanning for remaining Germans. The building was deserted, maps still pinned to walls, radio equipment still warm, coffee cups still steaming on desks. The Germans had evacuated so quickly they'd left everything behind. In the command room, Major found the wall map showing red pins marking every location where he'd attacked. 18 pins. He pulled one out and pocketed it, a souvenir of the longest night of his life. At 6:42 a.m., he heard voices outside, German voices. His hand moved to the Sten gun, but something in the tone stopped him. These weren't soldiers preparing to fight. These were men arguing. Major moved to the window. In the square below, 5 German soldiers stood in a circle. 4 of them looked young, maybe 19, 20 years old. The 5th was older, an Oberfeldwebel with a face hardened by years of combat. They were having a heated discussion in German. Major understood enough to catch the argument. The young soldiers wanted to surrender. The Feldwebel insisted they follow orders and withdraw east to rejoin the evacuation column. The young soldiers argued the war was lost. There was no point in more fighting. The Feldwebel pulled his Luger pistol and pointed it at one of the young soldiers. "You will follow orders, or I will shoot you for desertion." Major pushed open the city hall door and stepped into the square. All 5 Germans spun toward him, raising their weapons. Then they saw the eye patch, the blood-stained uniform, the Sten gun, held casually but ready to fire. They saw der Einäugige Teufel, the ghost who destroyed their garrison. "Drop your weapons," Major said in German. The 4 young soldiers immediately threw down their rifles. The Feldwebel kept his Luger raised, pointing it at Major instead of his own men. "You cannot take this city with one man," the Feldwebel said. His voice carried the conviction of someone refusing to accept reality. "I already have," Major replied. "Your commander evacuated 93 soldiers 2 hours ago. You 5 are all that remain. The war is over. Surrender." "Never." The Feldwebel's finger moved to the trigger. Major shot him. A single 3-round burst from the Sten gun. The Feldwebel collapsed, the unfired Luger clattering on cobblestones. The 4 young Germans stood frozen, staring at their dead sergeant. Major lowered the Sten gun. "You can stay and die, or you can leave and live." choose. They chose life. Major watched them run east, following the path their comrades had taken hours earlier. He was alone in the city square, alone in a city of 50,000 people who still slept, unaware of their liberation. At 6:58 a.m., Major walked to the Sint Mikkelskerk and climbed the stairs to the bell tower one last time. The bell rope hung beside him, a thick rope connected to the massive bronze bell that had called Dutch families to worship for 400 years. Major grabbed the rope and pulled. The bell tolled across Zwolle, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through every street, every alley, every home. It rang for liberation. It rang for freedom. It rang because one Canadian corporal with one eye had done the impossible. When the city woke, windows opened across Zwolle. Dutch families emerged onto their streets, confused by the bell ringing at dawn, confused by the silence where German patrols should be marching. They found abandoned checkpoints, discarded weapons, empty guard posts. They found Leo Major standing in the central square, leaning against a lamppost, smoking a cigarette he'd taken from a dead German soldier. His uniform was torn and burned. His face was covered in dust and dried blood. His single eye stared at nothing, reflecting exhaustion that went beyond physical. An old Dutchman approached cautiously, speaking in broken English. "The Germans, where are they?" "Gone," Major replied. "How many Canadian soldiers came?" Major took a drag from the cigarette. "One." The old man laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then he saw Major's expression, the absolute absence of humor, the weight of a night spent killing men, the look of someone who'd crossed a line and knew he could never cross back. "One," Major repeated, "just one." By 7:30 a.m., word had spread through Zwolle. The Germans had fled. The city was free. A single Canadian soldier had liberated them. Families emerged from their homes, crying, laughing, embracing. Dutch flags appeared in windows, hidden for 5 years, finally safe to display. Major walked through the streets as a growing crowd followed him, asking questions in Dutch and broken English, thanking him, trying to touch his uniform as if he were a saint. He said nothing, just kept walking, searching for the edge of the city where Willie Arsenault's body still lay in the street where he'd died. At 8:14 a.m., Canadian forces entered Zwolle, 2 full companies, 240 soldiers, supported by 3 Sherman tanks. They'd expected to fight a battle for the city. Instead, they found Dutch civilians celebrating in the streets, and one exhausted corporal sitting beside his dead friend's body, refusing to leave until he could bring Willie home. The company commander, Major Richards, approached with his weapon drawn, not believing what he was seeing. "Corporal Major, report. What the hell happened here?" Major looked up with his single eye. "Sir, reconnaissance mission completed. City is secure. Enemy forces evacuated at approximately 500 hours. Dutch civilian casualties, 0. Canadian casualties." His voice broke. "Private Arsenault, KIA at 0236 hours. Richards stared at him. "You're telling me you liberated this entire city by yourself?" "No, sir. Willie and I did it together. He died 3 hours before the Germans left, but he started this with me." Major stood, his legs shaking from exhaustion. "I'm bringing him home. That's non-negotiable, sir." "Corporal, do you understand what you've done? This is..." Richards struggled for words. "This is impossible. One man does not liberate a city of 50,000 people defended by a Wehrmacht garrison." "Then I guess the Wehrmacht didn't get the memo about what's impossible, sir." Major looked at the crowd of Dutch civilians, at the Canadian soldiers staring at him in disbelief, at Willie's body wrapped in a blanket by Dutch families who'd found him. "Permission to fall the fuck out, sir. I've been awake for 37 hours and I'd really like to not be conscious anymore." He collapsed. Canadian medics caught him before he hit the ground. His right hand still gripped the Sten gun. Even unconscious, the soldier refused to release his weapon. The Mathematics of Miracles German after-action reports, recovered from abandoned headquarters, recorded the following. Enemy strength estimated 80, 120 infantry actual enemy strength. 1 engagements reported, 19 separate attacks. Duration of combat, 6 hours, 17 minutes. German casualties, 27 killed, 18 wounded, 983 evacuated without engaging Canadian casualties. 1 killed, Private Arsenault. Kill ratio, 27-1. Territory liberated, 43 square kilometers. Population freed, 50,000 Dutch civilians. Wehrmacht tactical doctrine stated that urban defensive operations required defender advantage of 3.1 to hold against assault. Zwolle had 200-plus German defenders against what they believed was a battalion-strength attack. Standard mathematics said the Germans should have won. Leo Major didn't care about standard mathematics. He'd lost his best friend. He'd killed 27 men. He'd spent 6 hours running through a city, creating the illusion that he was everywhere simultaneously, that one man equaled an army. He'd gambled that fear was stronger than firepower, that psychology was more powerful than bullets. And he'd won. The bell of St. Mikkelskirk continued ringing through the morning as Dutch families danced in the streets. They rang it for 5 years of Nazi occupation finally ending. They rang it for Allied liberation. They rang it for the one-eyed Canadian corporal who'd become their legend. Somewhere in the unconscious darkness of exhausted sleep, Leo Major heard the bells and thought of Willie Arsenault, his friend, his brother, the soldier who died so a city could live. War is mathematics, but sometimes mathematics encounters men who refuse to be calculated. April 16, 1945, 9:47 a.m., Canadian Army Field Hospital, 20 kilometers west of Zwolle. Leo Major woke to the smell of antiseptic and canvas. His right eye opened slowly, adjusting to light filtering through the hospital tent. His left eye socket, empty, scarred, throbbed with phantom pain that doctors said would never fully disappear. He tried to sit up. His body refused. Every muscle screamed in protest. 48 hours of continuous combat followed by complete collapse had pushed his physiology beyond normal limits. A nurse appeared immediately, pressing him back down onto the cot. "Corporal Major, you need rest. Doctor's orders." "How long have I been unconscious?" 37 hours. You woke up twice, tried to leave both times. We sedated you." She checked his vitals with practiced efficiency. "Your body was shutting down. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, exhaustion. The doctor said another 6 hours of combat would have killed you." Major's hand moved instinctively to his hip, searching for the Sten gun. It wasn't there. Panic flared before he remembered. Zwolle was liberated. The Germans had fled. He didn't need the weapon anymore, but he still wanted it. "Private Arsenault," Major said. His voice was hoarse from screaming orders, from breathing smoke, from 6 hours of combat without water. "Where is he?" The nurse's expression softened. "His body is at the field morgue. We're arranging transport back to Canada for burial. You can see him when you're strong enough to walk." "I want to see him now." "Corporal, now." Major pushed himself upright, ignoring the nurse's protests, ignoring the wave of dizziness that made the tent spin. He'd carried Willie's memory through 6 hours of urban warfare. He'd killed 27 men while thinking about Willie dying in that street. He would see his friend one last time before the army took him away forever. The nurse helped him walk, not because she agreed, but because she knew he would go with or without assistance. The field morgue was a refrigerated truck parked 50 meters from the hospital tent. 8 bodies lay inside, covered with Canadian flags. The nurse pointed to the third from the left. Major pulled back the flag. Willie Arsenault looked peaceful, face cleaned by Dutch families who'd found him, wounds hidden beneath the uniform. He looked like he was sleeping. He looked 24 years old. He looked like someone's son, someone's friend, someone who would never go home. "I'm sorry, Willie," Major whispered in French, their shared language, the tongue of Quebec, the words that felt more honest than English. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry you died for a city you never knew. But I finished what we started. Zwolle is free. 50,000 people are alive because you helped me. That's something. That has to mean something." The body didn't answer. Dead men never do. Major stood there for 11 minutes memorizing Willie's face, storing it in the mental archive where he kept memories of all the friends he'd lost. D-Day, Caen, Falaise, Scheldt. 23 friends killed since Normandy. Willie was number 24. He wondered how many more numbers there would be before the war ended. When Heroes Become Legends, April 18, 1945. Canadian 2nd Infantry Division Headquarters. Major was summoned before commanding officers who'd spent 3 days trying to understand what happened in Zwolle. Lieutenant Colonel John Rockingham sat behind a desk covered with German reports, Dutch eyewitness accounts, and Canadian intelligence assessments. All of them told the same impossible story. One soldier liberated a city. "Corporal Major, I've read 14 different accounts of the Zwolle operation. German after-action reports claim they were attacked by a battalion. Dutch civilians say one Canadian freed their city. My own officers say you're either the bravest soldier in this army or the craziest." Rockingham leaned back, studying Major with the expression of someone encountering a tactical impossibility. "Which is it?" "Sir, I followed my orders. Conduct reconnaissance. Report enemy positions." Major's single eye met Rockingham's without flinching. The tactical situation changed. I adapted. "You call liberating an entire city adapting?" "Sir, with respect, the city wasn't the objective. Survival was. Retreat meant capture or death. Attack meant confusion and escape. I chose attack. The Germans chose evacuation. Everything else was mathematics." Rockingham shuffled through papers, finding the casualty report. 27 German soldiers killed, 18 wounded, 93 evacuated without engaging, 1 Canadian killed. Those are the mathematics. "Yes, sir." "Corporal, the Distinguished Conduct Medal is awarded for exceptional gallantry in action. In 200 years of British military history, only a handful of soldiers have received it twice." Rockingham pulled a small wooden box from his desk drawer. Inside, a silver cross hung from a red and blue ribbon. "You're receiving your first DCM for Zwolle. Command is recommending you for immediate promotion to sergeant and assignment to special operations." Major looked at the medal. It was beautiful. Polished silver reflecting light, ribbon carefully folded. It represented courage, sacrifice, military excellence. It was everything a soldier was supposed to want. He thought about Willie Arsenault lying in a refrigerated truck, waiting to go home in a box. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." "Keep the promotion. Keep the special operations. I don't want to be a hero. I want to finish this war and go home." Major's voice carried no emotion, just exhaustion that went deeper than physical. "Willie died 3 streets away from liberation. He'll never see his family again. He'll never get married, never have kids, never grow old. He died at 24 because I convinced him to keep moving forward instead of retreating. That's the real mathematics, sir. Every medal I receive is another friend who didn't." Rockingham was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked around the desk, and pinned the Distinguished Conduct Medal to Major's uniform himself. "Corporal, you can't bring him back, but you can honor him by staying alive. That's an order." Rockingham returned to his desk. "You're granted 2 weeks' leave. Go to Zwolle. The Dutch are asking for you. They want to thank the soldier who freed them. After that, you return to regular duties. No special operations, no suicide missions. Understood. Yes, sir? And Corporal, what you did in Zwolle? Rockingham shook his head. It's impossible, but you did it anyway. That's the definition of legend. The city remembers April 20th, 1945, Zwolle city center. The square where Major had stood alone 5 days earlier was now filled with 10,000 Dutch civilians, 1/5 of the city's population, waiting to see the one-eyed Canadian who'd become their liberation story. Major stood on the City Hall steps, uncomfortable in a clean uniform, the Distinguished Conduct Medal pinned above his heart. Beside him, the mayor of Zwolle prepared to give a speech in Dutch that Major wouldn't understand. Behind him, Canadian officers watched with the careful attention of men witnessing history. The mayor spoke for 7 minutes. Major caught a few words: vrijheid, freedom; held, hero; onmogelijk, impossible. The crowd listened in silence, tears running down faces that had known 5 years of Nazi occupation. Then the mayor turned to Major and spoke in careful English. Corporal Major, the people of Zwolle owe you a debt we can never repay. You risked your life and lost your friend to free strangers you had never met. We will remember this forever. We will tell our children and our children's children about the one-eyed Canadian who liberated us. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a sound Major had never heard before. It was deeper than applause, more primal than celebration. It was the collective voice of 50,000 people exhaling 5 years of fear all at once. They surrounded him. Families who wanted to touch his uniform, shake his hand, kiss his cheeks. Old men who'd survived World War I, recognizing something in his scarred face. Young children who stared at his eye patch with the innocent curiosity of those too young to understand horror. Women who pressed flowers into his hands, food into his pockets, blessings into his ears in Dutch. He couldn't translate, but understood instinctively. An old woman grabbed his shoulders, looked into his single eye, and said in broken English, "My grandson, Germans took him in 1943, sent to work camp. He never came home. You gave us freedom he never had. Thank you, thank you." She collapsed, sobbing. Major held her. This stranger whose grief was identical to the grief of every soldier who'd lost friends, every family who'd lost sons. War created mathematics of death that numbers couldn't capture. Willie Arsenault was one casualty. This woman's grandson was one casualty, but each one was infinite to the people who loved them. That night, Major sat alone in a room the Dutch had given him. The finest hotel in Zwolle, the best suite, everything paid for by grateful citizens. He stared at the Distinguished Conduct Medal, at the eye patch he'd removed for the first time in days, at the letter he was writing to Willie Arsenault's parents in Montreal. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Arsenault, your son Willie died a hero. That's what the army will tell you. It's true, but it's not enough. He died 3 streets from freedom. He died because I asked him to keep moving forward. He died at 2:36 a.m. on April 14th, 1945, in a city called Zwolle, fighting for people he'd never met. I think about him every hour. I see his face when I close my eye. I hear his voice when the world gets quiet. I will carry him with me for the rest of my life. The city we liberated has 50,000 people. Every one of them is alive because your son was brave enough to follow me into darkness. That doesn't make his death fair. It doesn't make it right, but it means something. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home alive. Corporal Leo Major." He never sent the letter. How do you explain to parents that their son's death meant something? How do you calculate the exchange rate between one dead soldier and 50,000 freed civilians? There was no mathematics for grief. The second impossible mission. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Major returned to Canada, to his wife and children, to a life that felt foreign after 6 years of combat. He tried to forget. The army gave him medals. Historians wrote about Zwolle. Dutch families sent letters thanking him every year on April 14th. But Leo Major couldn't stop being a soldier. In 1950, the Korean War began. Communist North Korea invaded South Korea. The United Nations requested troops. Canada sent soldiers. Major, now 38 years old, supposedly retired, supposedly done with war, volunteered. His wife asked why. He said, "Because someone has to." November 23, 1951, Hill 355, South Korea. The Chinese People's Liberation Army launched a massive assault, 14,000 soldiers attacking a position defended by 240 American and Canadian troops. The mathematics said the defenders would be overrun in hours. Sergeant Leo Major, promoted after Zwolle despite his protests, commanded a forward observation post with 18 soldiers. Their orders: hold the hill until reinforcements arrived. Expected survival time, 90 minutes. The Chinese attacked in human wave formations, hundreds of soldiers charging simultaneously, absorbing casualties, overwhelming defensive positions through sheer numbers. Standard UN defensive doctrine said withdrawal was mandatory when outnumbered 50.1. Major refused to withdraw. For 72 hours, 3 days and 3 nights, Major's 18-man unit held Hill 355 against 14,000 Chinese attackers. He called in artillery strikes on his own position when Chinese forces got too close. He led bayonet charges when ammunition ran low. He personally killed an estimated 40-plus enemy soldiers and maintained defensive coordination that prevented Chinese breakthrough. American commanders monitoring the battle couldn't believe radio reports. One Canadian sergeant holding a position against division-strength assault? Impossible. Leo Major had heard that word before. When reinforcements finally arrived on November 26th, they found Major's position surrounded by 800-plus Chinese casualties. Major himself had been wounded 3 times. Shrapnel in the leg, bullet grazing his skull, broken ribs from mortar impact, but refused evacuation until every one of his soldiers was treated first. The U.S. military awarded him the Distinguished Service Cross. Canada gave him a second Distinguished Conduct Medal, making him the only Canadian to receive the DCM twice, both times for actions deemed impossible by military analysts. Major accepted the medals, thanked the officers, and went back to duty, because that's what soldiers do. The mathematics of legacy Leo Major died on October 12, 2008, age 87, in his home in Montreal. He'd lived 63 years after Zwolle. He'd raised 3 children. He'd worked as a pipe fitter after Korea. He'd refused interviews for decades, avoiding publicity, insisting he wasn't special. But Zwolle never forgot. On April 14th, every year, Dutch families gather at a monument in Zwolle's central square. The monument shows a one-eyed soldier standing alone, surrounded by names of German positions destroyed that night. Rail yard, supply depot, communications post, ammunition warehouse. At the base, an inscription in Dutch and English. On the night of April 13-14, 1945, one Canadian soldier liberated this city. His courage saved 50,000 lives. Zwolle will remember forever. A street in Zwolle bears his name, Leo Major. Dutch children learn his story in schools. Every April 14th, Canadian flags fly beside Dutch flags throughout the city. Veterans associations maintain his memory as sacred, the soldier who proved one person could change history. In 2005, 3 years before his death, Major returned to Zwolle for the 60th anniversary of liberation. Now 83 years old, nearly blind in his remaining eye, he walked through streets where he'd fought at 32. 10,000 Dutch citizens lined the roads, applauding a man who'd saved their grandparents. A reporter asked him, "Do you regret what you did that night?" Major thought about Willie Arsenault, dead at 24, about the 27 German soldiers he'd killed, about 50,000 Dutch civilians freed. about Hill 355 and 14,000 Chinese attacking 18 Canadians. About 63 years of living with memories that never faded. War is mathematics, he finally said. You calculate odds, you assess risks. Sometimes the mathematics says you should retreat. Sometimes it says you should surrender. But mathematics can't calculate courage. It can't measure what one person is willing to sacrifice for strangers. That's not mathematics. That's choice. So you'd do it again? I'd save Willie. That's the only mathematics that matters. He died 3 years later. His funeral in Montreal was attended by Canadian military officials, Dutch diplomats, and Korean War veterans. 3 flags draped his casket, Canadian, Dutch, and South Korean. 3 nations that owed him debts they could never repay. At the funeral, his daughter read a letter he'd written before his death. I'm not a hero. Heroes don't exist. Only soldiers who refuse to quit when mathematics says they should. I fought 2 impossible battles. I won both, but I lost friends in each. That's the real calculation. Every victory costs something. Every medal weighs more than metal. If you remember me, remember this. Courage isn't refusing to be afraid. It's choosing to move forward when fear says stop. When numbers become names today, military academies study the Zwolle operation as a case study in psychological warfare. Textbooks describe Major's tactics, attacking from multiple positions to create illusion of larger force, targeting command infrastructure to paralyze decision-making, using fear as a force multiplier. The numbers are documented. 1 soldier versus 200 plus. German defenders, 6 hours, 17 minutes of continuous combat. 50,000 civilians liberated, 27 enemy KIA. 93 evacuated without resistance. 1 Canadian KIA, Willie Arsenault, never forgotten. But numbers can't capture what Leo Major did that night. They can't explain how one man convinced an army he was everywhere simultaneously. They can't calculate the psychological impact of a soldier who refused to accept impossible as an answer. In Zwolle, tourists visit the Liberation Monument and ask Dutch guides, is this story real? Did one man really liberate this city? The guides always answer the same way. Come to Zwolle on April 14th. Watch 50,000 people commemorate a night they'll never forget. Then ask if it's real. The bell of St. Mikkelskirk still rings every April 14th at 6:58 a.m., the exact time Major rang it to announce liberation. Dutch families wake to that sound and remember a one-eyed Canadian corporal who proved that courage doesn't need an army. It just needs one person who refuses to retreat. Leo Major, 1921-2008, Corporal, Canadian Army Distinguished Conduct Medal twice. The soldier who liberated a city alone. Epilogue, The Impossible Made Real. In 2008, a Canadian documentary team traveled to Zwolle to film the 63rd Liberation Anniversary. They interviewed Dutch citizens who'd lived through the occupation, who remembered the night of April 13th and 14, 1945. An 89-year-old woman named Anna Decker told them, I was 26 years old. I woke to church bells at dawn. We thought it was another German announcement. But when I looked outside, there were no soldiers. Just one man in the square, Canadian uniform, eye patch, smoking a cigarette. My father asked him where the Germans were. He said, I sent them home. We didn't believe him. How could one man? She paused, her eyes distant, remembering. But he did. One man. That's all it took. The mathematics of war are brutal, but sometimes mathematics encounters men like Leo Major, soldiers who refuse to be calculated, who turn impossible odds into accomplished facts, who remind us that history isn't made by armies. It's made by individuals who choose to fight when every calculation says they should run. Zwolle remembers. Korea remembers. Canada remembers. The bell still rings at 6:58 a.m. every April 14th. And somewhere in the mathematics of legacy, Leo Major and Willie Arsenault stand together, two soldiers who started a mission, one who died before it finished, one who completed it alone. But neither of them was ever truly alone.